Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers, but from those you've loved and sacrificed for all your life. I remember the exact moment I realized my own children saw me as nothing more than a faded photograph on the wall. Someone to be dismissed, not cherished. That day I didn't weep or shout. Instead, I watched and listened, letting the sting of their words settle deep in my bones. It was then that I understood. The game had changed, and I would need to play it differently. My name is Margaret Hall, and for over 50 years, I was the backbone of this family. Now, I would become its reckoning. Hey there, I'm Margaret. Before we get started, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Now, let's begin my story. One of betrayal, awakening, and a final lesson in respect. I stood in my kitchen at 5:30 in the morning, flour dusting my apron as I rolled out the third batch of dinner rolls. The annual family reunion was tonight, and I'd been preparing for 3 days straight. My hands moved automatically, knead, roll, shape, while my mind wandered through the checklist I'd memorized. Margaret, have you seen my blue tie? William's voice drifted from upstairs, followed by the sound of drawers slamming. In your closet, right side, behind the gray suits, I called back, not missing a beat in my rhythm. The phone rang. I wiped my hands and answered, expecting one of the usual last-minute changes. Mom, I'm running late. Rachel's voice was sharp with stress. Can you pick up Sophie from school? David's stuck in court and I have this presentation that... Of course, honey. What time? 3:15. And Mom? Sophie needs help with her history project tonight. Something about the Civil War. You were always good at that stuff. I'll take care of it. I glanced at my list, mentally adding 2 more tasks. Great. Oh, and can you make sure there's something vegetarian for David? He's trying this new diet thing. The line went dead before I could respond. I sighed and returned to my rolls, adding vegetarian option to my mental list. By noon, I'd finished the cooking and started setting up the dining room. Helen knocked on my back door as I arranged the centerpiece. Need help? She asked, holding a covered dish. You brought something? Helen, you didn't need to. Nonsense. What are friends for? She set down what smelled like her famous apple pie. You look tired, Margaret. I'm fine. Just excited to see everyone. Helen gave me that look, the one that said she saw, right through my cheerful facade. When's the last time someone asked how you were doing? Really asked? I busied myself adjusting napkins. They care. They're just busy. Helen helped me move chairs around the extended table. Remember what I told you last month? That I need to speak up more. That you need to value yourself the way you value them. Before I could respond, Tom burst through the front door with his usual dramatic flair. Mom, perfect timing. Can I borrow $200? Just until next Friday. This client meeting ran over and... Hello to you too, Tom. I kissed his cheek. The money's in my purse. You're a lifesaver. He grabbed the cash and noticed Helen. Oh, hey, Mrs. Patterson. Thanks for bringing... whatever that is. Apple pie, Helen said dryly. Cool. Mom, is Matthew coming tonight? I told him about your pot roast. I made enough for everyone, I assured him. Tom disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Helen shaking her head. He didn't even say thank you, she murmured. He's grateful. He just doesn't show it the same way we do. Rachel arrived next, Sophie in tow, her phone pressed to her ear. No, I told you the Henderson case needs to be filed by 5. She was saying, yes, today. She looked at me and mouthed, sorry, while pointing at her phone. Sophie hugged me properly. "Hi, Grandma. Mom said you'd help with my project?" "Of course, sweetheart. We'll work on it after dinner." "Can you also look at my essay? Mrs. Johnson said I need to improve my thesis statement, but I don't understand what she means." "I'd be happy to help." Rachel finished her call and surveyed my preparations. "Mom, this looks great, but didn't I mention David's diet? I don't see any vegetarian lasagna in the second oven," I said. "Salad's dairy-free too, just in case." "Oh, good." She seemed almost disappointed she couldn't find a flaw. "Sophie, go wash up. And remember what we talked about. Don't interrupt the adults when they're talking." My brother Daniel arrived with Evelyn, both looking harried. "Margaret, thank God," Evelyn said, thrusting a bag at me. "I brought wine, but I forgot a corkscrew. Do you have one?" "Several. Kitchen. Drawer. Left of the sink." Daniel hugged me briefly. "Smells incredible in here. Evelyn tried to cook last week and nearly burned the house down." "I did not," Evelyn protested. "The smoke alarm is just sensitive." "To actual smoke," Daniel shot back. I guided them toward the living room where William was finally making an appearance, properly tied and looking distinguished. "Everyone here?" he asked. "Matthew's coming with Tom," I said. "Mrs. Green might stop by for dessert." "The whole neighborhood? Again?" Rachel sounded exasperated. "Mom, this is supposed to be family time. Mrs. Green has been alone since her husband died. It's one piece of pie." "It's not about the pie. It's about boundaries." Helen caught my eye and raised an eyebrow. I pretended not to notice. Dinner started smoothly. The conversation flowed around safe topics: Sophie's grades, William's golf game, Daniel's new job. I barely sat down, constantly refilling glasses and checking that everyone had enough. "Margaret, sit," Helen said firmly when I passed her chair for the 4th time. "Everything's perfect." "Just making sure." "Sit." I sat, but my eyes kept scanning the table, checking for empty plates or missing items. "So, Tom," Rachel said, cutting into her second helping of pot roast, "how's the business going? Still working on that big contract?" Tom straightened, energized by the attention. "Actually, we're in final negotiations. Could be worth 6 figures." "That's wonderful," I said. "All your hard work is paying off." "Yeah, well, I've been putting in 18-hour days. Networking, client meetings, the whole deal. It's all about persistence in this business." David nodded approvingly. "Smart approach. Building relationships is key." I remembered the loan payments I'd been covering for 8 months, the networking event fees I'd quietly paid, the business cards I'd designed for free. But Tom seemed genuinely proud, and I didn't want to diminish his moment. "And Rachel," Evelyn turned to my daughter. "Daniel mentioned you got promoted?" Rachel beamed. "Senior partner track. It's been intense, but I've been building my caseload strategically, taking on the high-profile clients, working weekends." "She's brilliant," David added. "Natural instincts for the law." I thought about the late nights I'd spent watching Sophie so Rachel could work, the law school application essays I'd helped edit, the bar exam study sessions I'd facilitated with endless coffee and encouragement. But Rachel looked so confident, so accomplished. "I'm proud of you both," I said genuinely. The conversation moved to Daniel's promotion and Evelyn's volunteer work. Everyone had updates, achievements, stories to share. I listened and smiled and asked follow-up questions, feeling a familiar warm glow at their successes. After dinner, while I cleared plates, the family gathered in the living room. Sophie was showing off her latest artwork to anyone who'd pay attention. "That's nice, honey," Rachel said absently, checking her phone. "Very colorful." "It's the Battle of Gettysburg," Sophie explained. "See, these are the Union soldiers and—" "Sophie, let the adults talk," Tom interrupted. "Matthew was just telling us about his new car." I paused in the doorway, holding a stack of plates, watching Sophie's face fall. "Why don't you tell me about it in the kitchen?" I suggested. "I'd love to hear about Gettysburg." Sophie brightened and followed me out. As we loaded the dishwasher together, her chatter about Civil War battles filled the comfortable silence. I was genuinely interested. Her teacher had clearly inspired real passion for history. "You know so much about this stuff, Grandma," Sophie said. "Mom says you used to be a teacher." "I was, for 32 years. Did you like it?" "I loved it. Every day was different." "Why did you stop?" I paused, a plate halfway to the rack. "Well, Grandpa wanted me to retire when he did, and your mom needed help with you when you were little. Uncle Tom was starting his business. But what did you want?" Such a simple question, such a complicated answer. "I wanted to help my family," I said finally. From the living room, I could hear the conversation getting animated. Someone was laughing. Tom, probably. I finished the dishes while Sophie worked on her homework at the kitchen table, occasionally asking me questions about battle strategies and historical context. "You should be a teacher," she said suddenly. "I was a teacher, sweetheart." "No, I mean now. You explain things better than anyone." Before I could respond, raised voices from the living room caught my attention. "She just doesn't understand modern business," Tom was saying. "I mean, she was a teacher for 30 years. Great for her, but it's not exactly the real world." My hand stilled in the soapy water. "Mom's always been sheltered," Rachel added. "She married young, had us kids, taught elementary school. She never had to navigate corporate politics or serious financial pressure." "That's not fair." Helen's voice cut in. "Your mother has more wisdom than—" "I'm not criticizing her," Rachel said quickly. "I'm just saying she doesn't always understand the complexities we deal with. Her advice is sweet, but it's simple, old-fashioned." "Exactly," Tom agreed. "Like when she told me to just work harder when the Peterson deal fell through. She doesn't get that sometimes it's about market forces, not effort." Daniel chimed in. "Remember when she suggested I just talk to my boss about the promotion? Like it's that easy. She's never had to politic her way up a corporate ladder." "She means well," Evelyn said diplomatically. "But she's never really been challenged. Teaching kids isn't like dealing with adult problems." I stood frozen at the sink, soap suds sliding down my forearms. Sophie had stopped writing and was looking at me with wide, worried eyes. "Are they talking about you?" she whispered. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. "That's mean," Sophie said fiercely. "You're the smartest person I know." From the living room, William's voice joined in. "Margaret's always been content with simple things. Sometimes I think she chose teaching because it was safe, easy." The plate in my hand slipped, clattering into the sink. In the living room, the conversation stopped abruptly. "Everything okay in there?" Rachel called. "Fine," I managed. "Just dropped something." The talking resumed, but quieter now. I dried, my hands slowly, processing what I'd heard. Sophie was watching me with the intense protective expression of someone far too young to understand family dynamics, but old enough to recognize injustice. "They don't know," she said quietly. Know what? All the stuff you do. All the times you help them. I sat down beside her at the table. They know, sweetheart. They just express gratitude differently. That wasn't gratitude. That was mean. Out of the mouths of babes, Helen appeared in the doorway. I'm heading home. Walk me out? I nodded, following her to the back door. The cool evening air felt sharp against my heated cheeks. You heard? Helen said. It wasn't a question. Every word. What are you going to do? I looked back at my house, warm with light and full of my family. I don't know. Margaret. Helen took my hands. You've spent 63 years putting everyone else first. When does it become your turn? They're my family. And you're a person, with feelings, with worth beyond what you can do for them. I squeezed her hands and let go. Thank you for coming tonight. And for the pie. Margaret, I'm fine, Helen, really. She studied my face in the porch light. No, you're not. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. After everyone left and the kitchen was spotless, I sat alone at my dining room table. The house felt different somehow. Smaller, quieter. I replayed their words, examining each phrase like a student analyzing a difficult passage. They thought I was simple, sheltered. That my life's work, teaching, raising them, holding this family together, was somehow less than their corporate achievements. I thought about the complexity of managing 28 third graders, each with different learning styles and home situations, the delicate balance of parent conferences, administrative demands, and actual education. The summers I spent taking continuing education courses, learning new teaching methods, expanding my skills. I thought about the year Rachel struggled with depression in high school, how I researched therapists and insurance coverage while working full-time and managing Tom's learning disability accommodations. I thought about the business plan I'd helped Tom write, the financial projections I'd calculated, the investors I'd helped him contact through my former students' parents. Simple, old-fashioned, sheltered. I pulled out a notebook and began to write. Not a to-do list this time, but something else entirely. A different kind of list. At the top of the page I wrote, "What they don't know," and I began to fill it in. I woke at dawn, as I had every day for 40 years. But this morning felt different. The notebook lay open beside my coffee cup. 3 pages of careful handwriting documenting a lifetime of invisible work. The phone rang before I'd finished my first cup. Mom, I forgot to mention. Rachel's voice was already moving at full speed. I need you to take Sophie to her orthodontist appointment Thursday. The time change with the Henderson case means I can't. What time? I reached for my calendar. Pen ready. 2:30. And can you pick up her retainer? They said it'll be ready. Also, she has that history project due Friday, so if you could, I'll handle it. I wrote Thursday. Sophie, Ortho 2:30. Project help. You're amazing. I don't know what we'd do without you. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, remembering her words from last night. Old-fashioned, simple, sheltered. Amazing when she needed something. Simple when she didn't. I opened my notebook to a fresh page and titled it, This Week's Requests. Rachel's name went at the top. By 10 o'clock, I'd fielded 3 more calls. Tom needed me to co-sign a lease renewal because his credit was temporarily complicated. Daniel wanted help moving furniture this weekend. Evelyn wondered if I could watch their dog while they went to a wedding. Each request went into the notebook, along with the date and time. I was building something, though I wasn't sure what. Yet. Helen knocked while I was updating my list. "How are you feeling?" she asked, settling into her usual kitchen chair. "Like I've been sleepwalking for 20 years and just woke up." "That's progress." She noticed the notebook. "What's that?" I showed her my lists. Her eyebrows rose as she read. "Margaret, this is..." She paused, calculating. "You've given Rachel over $15,000 in the last 2 years, and that's just what you've written down. She needed help with the down payment, and then Sophie's dental work, and Tom." I flipped pages. "Probably more. His business loans, the apartment deposits when he kept moving, that time his car was repossessed. When did you last ask them for help with something?" I couldn't answer. The silence stretched until Helen sighed. "Tell me about the first time you sacrificed something important for them." The memory came immediately. Rachel was 8. She wanted to take violin lessons, but we couldn't afford both violin and the continuing education classes I needed for my teaching certification renewal. "What did you do?" "Chose the violin lessons. Delayed my certification another year. And she quit violin after 6 months. Said it was boring." Helen's expression said everything. "What about Tom?" "When he was 12, William got laid off. I took a second job, tutoring after school, cleaning offices on weekends. Tom needed new soccer cleats, equipment for the team." "You gave up your weekends for soccer cleats." "He loved soccer." "How long did he play?" I didn't want to answer. "1 season. 1 season. Helen." "I'm not judging their choices, Margaret. I'm pointing out yours." She leaned forward. "You've spent 40 years anticipating their needs, solving their problems, funding their dreams. When do you get to have dreams?" "I did have dreams. I wanted them to be happy. What did you want for yourself?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I thought of my teaching career, cut short when William wanted me to retire. The master's degree I'd never finished because family needs kept interrupting. The writing I'd loved but abandoned when the house got busier. "I wanted to write," I said quietly. "Stories, maybe a novel. I had ideas." What happened to those ideas? Life happened. Kids, family, responsibilities. Other people manage both. "Other people don't have my family." The words came, out sharper than intended. Helen's smile was sad. "No, they don't. Most people's families don't expect quite so much." That afternoon, Sophie called from school. "Grandma, I forgot my history textbook and I need it for the project tonight. Can you bring it?" "Where is it?" "My room, I think. On the desk, maybe?" I found it under a pile of clothes on her floor, along with 3 library books that were probably overdue. As I drove to her school, I thought about Helen's question. When did I last ask them for help? Last month, when I'd had the flu and couldn't drive to the grocery store. I'd ordered delivery rather than ask anyone to shop for me. When my kitchen faucet broke, I'd called a plumber instead of asking Tom, who claimed to be handy with tools. I'd trained them to expect help without offering it in return. Sophie was waiting in the school office, looking genuinely grateful when I handed over the textbook. "Thank you, Grandma. I'm sorry I forgot it." "It happens. But Sophie, what would you have done if I couldn't come?" She looked puzzled. "I guess? Asked Mom to leave work?" "Would she have been able to?" "Probably not. She says her job is really demanding." "More demanding than mine used to be." Sophie frowned, thinking. "I don't know. Was your job demanding?" I almost laughed. How could she know? I'd retired before she was old enough to understand jobs, and no one in the family ever talked about my career as if it had been real work. Teaching is demanding in different ways. You have to manage dozens of children, plan lessons, grade papers, deal with parents, handle emergencies. That sounds hard. It was. But I loved it. Why did you stop? Because your grandfather wanted company in retirement. Because your mother needed help with childcare. Because Uncle Tom was struggling financially and needed support. Because everyone needed something, and I was there to provide it. I thought it was time, I said instead. That evening, I called my former principal, Janet Morrison. We'd kept in touch sporadically since my retirement. Margaret, how wonderful to hear from you. How are you enjoying retirement? It's been an adjustment. Janet, can I ask you something? When I left, was there anything you wished I'd stayed? To finish. A pause. Are you thinking about coming back? I'm just curious. Well, honestly, there were several projects I'd hoped you'd lead. The new literacy program, mentoring for young teachers. The district office asked about you specifically for curriculum development. They did. Multiple times. Your expertise in early childhood development is highly regarded. We could never find anyone with your combination of classroom experience and theoretical knowledge. After we hung up, I sat staring at the phone. Highly regarded expertise. Not simple or old-fashioned or sheltered. I opened my notebook to a new page. What I actually know. The list grew longer than I'd expected. Child development theories, curriculum design, learning disabilities, and accommodation strategies, educational psychology, classroom management, parent communication, crisis intervention, budget management for school programs. I thought about the year I'd single-handedly prevented a teacher strike by negotiating between the union and administration. The grant I'd written that brought $50,000 to our literacy program. The innovative reading system I'd developed that other schools had adopted. The phone rang. Tom. Mom, I hate to ask, but could you swing by tomorrow? The apartment's a mess, and I have this client meeting here Tuesday. If you could just do a quick clean. Tom, do you remember what I used to do for work? Huh? You were a teacher. What kind of teacher? Elementary, right? Little kids. 3rd grade, for 32 years. Okay. Why? Do you know what 3rd grade teachers do? He sounded impatient. Teach reading and math and stuff? We develop curriculum. We assess learning needs. We create individualized education plans. We manage classroom budgets. We write grants. We lead parent conferences. We handle behavioral crises. We mentor new teachers. We collaborate with special education teams, school psychologists, administrators. Silence. We also clean up messes, I continued. But it's not our primary job description. Mom, are you okay? You sound weird. I'm fine. About tomorrow. I can't help with cleaning. What? Why not? I have other commitments. Like what? I looked at my empty calendar. Personal business. Mom, come on. It'll take like 2 hours. And this client is really important. Tom, when's the last time you cleaned my house? What? When's the last time you offered to help me with something? I help you all the time. With what? Another silence. Longer this time. You never ask. I never ask because I've learned not to expect help. But maybe that's my mistake. Mom, what's going on? Is this about last night? Because if someone said something, This is about me realizing that respect isn't something I can earn by doing more. It's something I have to insist on. Of course I respect you. Then respect my time enough to clean your own apartment. I hung up before he could respond. The house felt different that night. Quieter, but not empty. Purposeful, instead of waiting. I made myself a cup of tea and opened my notebook to a fresh page. What changes now? At the top, I wrote, I will no longer enable disrespect by accepting it silently. Below that, I will set boundaries and maintain them. And finally, I will remember that love doesn't require me to disappear. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. Sunday dinner had been a tradition in our family for 15 years. Every week I spent Saturday shopping and cooking, Sunday morning setting up and Sunday evening cleaning. Everyone expected it, no one questioned it, and until recently, I'd never minded. This Sunday felt different as I stood at the stove, stirring gravy with one hand and checking the roast with the other. My notebook sat open on the counter. 3 days of new entries documenting the subtle demands and casual dismissals that had become my normal. Rachel arrived first, phone pressed to her ear as usual. No, the Henderson brief needs to be filed by 8 tomorrow morning, she was saying as she kissed my cheek. I don't care if you have to work late. She ended the call and immediately started inspecting the meal preparation. Everything looks great, Mom. Is there enough for David? He's bringing his new client, some merger thing they're working on. You didn't mention a guest. It's just one more person. You always make enough. I did always make enough. I'd learned early in my marriage to over-prepare rather than face the stress of running short. But today, that automatic accommodation felt different. What's his name? I asked. Who? The client. Rachel looked puzzled. Why does it matter? Because he's eating at my table. I'd like to know who I'm serving. Oh. Johnson, I think. Or Jackson. David handles the details. Before I could respond, Tom burst through the front door with his usual dramatic energy. Perfect timing, he announced to no one in particular. Mom, you'll never guess what happened with the Morrison account. They practically begged me to. He stopped mid-sentence, noticing my expression. What's wrong? You look different. I'm fine. Good, because I have amazing news. The Morrison deal went through and they want to sign an exclusive contract. 6 months, renewable, with a performance bonus clause. I continued stirring gravy. That's wonderful. It is. This is exactly the kind of breakthrough I've been working toward. All those late nights, all the networking events, all the relationship building. It's finally paying off. Rachel looked up from her phone. Wait, Morrison? As in Morrison Industries? The very same. Tom, that's huge. How did you land them? Tom launched into his story, gesturing expansively as he described client meetings and presentation strategies. I listened while finishing the meal preparation, remembering the networking event I'd paid for 3 months ago, the business cards I'd designed, the mortgage payment I'd covered so he could attend a weekend conference in Chicago. None of that made it into his version of events. Daniel and Evelyn arrived as I was carrying serving dishes to the dining room. Margaret, you've outdone yourself again, Evelyn said, surveying the table. I don't know how you manage it every week. 30 years of practice, I said. William emerged from his study, looking distinguished in his Sunday cardigan. Everyone here? David's bringing a client, Rachel said. I hope that's okay. William shrugged. The more the merrier. They arrived 20 minutes later. David looking apologetic, his client looking politely interested. David introduced him as Robert Jackson from Jackson Holdings, confirming that Rachel hadn't bothered to remember his name. "Mrs. Hall, thank you for accommodating an unexpected guest," Robert said, shaking my hand. "I hope it's not an inconvenience." "Not at all," I lied smoothly. "Please, sit anywhere." Dinner conversation flowed around the usual topics: work successes, social plans, neighborhood gossip. I served and cleared and refilled, participating when spoken to, but mostly observing. Tom dominated much of the conversation with his Morrison Industries story, now enhanced with additional details about his strategic thinking and natural business instincts. "It's all about reading people," he explained to Robert, "understanding what they need before they know it themselves." Rachel nodded approvingly. Tom's always been intuitive about business relationships. I thought about the 3 networking events I'd attended with him early in his career, watching him freeze up in conversations until I stepped in to make introductions. The social skills workshops I'd re-see, whacked and paid for when he struggled with client presentations. "Mom, could you bring more rolls?" Tom asked without looking at me. "Please," I said quietly. "What?" "Could you please bring more rolls?" Tom looked confused. "Right, please." The conversation moved to Rachel's promotion prospects. She described her strategy for making senior partner, emphasizing her billable hours and high-profile cases. "I've been building my reputation strategically," she explained. "Taking on challenging cases, working directly with senior partners, making myself indispensable." David smiled proudly. "She's brilliant at managing up. Natural instincts for firm politics." I remembered the mock interviews I'd conducted when she was applying for law school, the scholarship applications I'd helped her write, the late nights I'd spent proofreading legal briefs during her first year as an associate. "The key is understanding that law is ultimately about people," Rachel continued. "You have to be able to read situations, adapt your approach, communicate effectively." "Where did you learn those skills?" Robert asked politely. Rachel considered the question. "Law school, mostly. Trial and error. Some people are just natural communicators." I set down my fork carefully. "You learned communication skills from me." The table went quiet. Everyone looked at me with varying degrees of surprise. "What?" Rachel asked. "When you were 8 and afraid to ask your teacher about makeup work after being sick, I taught you how to structure a request. When you were 12 and having conflicts with friends, we practiced active listening techniques. Throughout high school, we worked on presentation skills, argument structure, how to read an audience. Mom, when you were studying for the bar exam, you practiced oral arguments at this table every Sunday for 3 months. I played opposing counsel, judge, and jury, so you could learn to think on your feet." The silence stretched uncomfortably. Rachel's face had gone pink. "I remember that," Sophie said suddenly from the far end of the table. "You used to pretend to be different people, Mom. Different voices and everything." "That's not—" Rachel started, then stopped. Tom shifted in his chair. "Mom, what's this about?" "This is about giving credit where it's due." I looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. Rachel didn't develop communication skills naturally. Tom didn't instinctively understand business relationships. These are things we worked on together. "Nobody's saying we didn't learn from you," Tom said carefully. "Actually, that's exactly what you're saying. When you describe your successes, I disappear from the story entirely." William cleared his throat. "Margaret, I think you're being a bit sensitive." "Am I?" I turned to him. William, tell Robert how you learned to manage your finances. William looked confused. I don't understand. You were 24 years old when we married. You'd never balanced a checkbook, never created a budget, never tracked expenses. Who taught you? That was 40 years ago, Margaret. Who taught you? He shifted uncomfortably. You did. And who's been managing our household finances ever since? Well, you, but when you talk to friends about financial planning, you never mention that, do you? The dining room felt charged with tension. Robert Jackson looked like he wished he were anywhere else. Mom, Rachel said carefully, what exactly are you trying to say? I'm trying to say that for 40 years, I've been the invisible foundation of this family. I've taught, supported, funded, and facilitated everyone's achievements. But when you tell your success stories, I vanish. When you describe your skills and accomplishments, my contribution disappears. That's not fair, Tom protested. We've always been grateful. Have you? I stood up, beginning to clear plates with sharp, efficient movements. Tom, when did you last thank me for co-signing your lease? Rachel, when did you acknowledge the childcare I provide so you can work? Late. Daniel, when did you mention that I've been your emergency contact for 5 years? Margaret, Evelyn said quietly, we appreciate everything you do. Do you? Because 3 days ago, in this room, I heard you discuss how I've never faced real challenges, how my advice is simple and old-fashioned, how my work was easy because it was just teaching children. The silence was deafening. You were listening? Rachel asked. I was cleaning your dishes when you decided to analyze my limitations. Tom's face had gone red. That wasn't... We didn't mean... You meant every word. I set down the plates I was holding. And maybe you're right. Maybe I have been simple. Simple enough to accept disrespect. Simple enough to give without expecting gratitude. Simple enough to disappear into the background of my own life. Mom, you're overreacting, Rachel said. We were just talking. Just talking about how I never faced real challenges. My voice was getting stronger, clearer. Rachel, who do you think handled the crisis when Sophie had pneumonia and you were in trial? Who managed the insurance paperwork, the specialist appointments, the medication schedules? You offered to help. I didn't offer. You expected it. There's a difference. I turned to Tom. Who do you think researched business insurance options when you couldn't figure out liability coverage? Who read through contracts when you were overwhelmed by legal language? Mom, I'm grateful for all of that. Are you? Because grateful people don't dismiss their helpers as ignorant. The room was completely quiet now. Even Sophie had stopped eating. I taught for 32 years, I continued, my voice steady and clear. I managed classroom budgets, wrote grant applications, developed curriculum, mentored new teachers, and handled crises that would challenge any corporate executive. I've raised 2 children, maintained a marriage, supported extended family, and somehow found time to be everyone's problem solver, financial backup, and emotional support system. Robert Jackson was staring at his plate, clearly wishing he could disappear. But apparently, I said, looking directly at my children, none of that qualifies as understanding the real world. Margaret, William said quietly, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No. The word came out sharper than I'd intended. We should have discussed this privately 40 years ago. We should have discussed respect and gratitude and basic courtesy when it might have made a difference. Tom pushed back from the table. Look, Mom, if we hurt your feelings... This isn't about hurt feelings, Tom. This is about fundamental respect. I remained standing, looking down at my family. You don't get to dismiss my intelligence, mock my experience, and then ask me to clean your apartment. When did I mock? Thursday, when you asked me to clean for your client meeting. After spending Wednesday evening explaining to everyone here how I don't understand modern business. Rachel was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Mom, maybe... We did speak carelessly, but this seems like an overreaction. Does it? I walked to the sideboard and pulled out my notebook. Should I read you some entries from this week? Their faces changed as they saw the careful handwriting, the documented requests and dismissals. You've been keeping notes? Daniel asked. I've been keeping track. Tuesday, Tom needed co-signing. No thank you. Wednesday, Rachel needed childcare. Interrupted twice during her request. Thursday, Evelyn needed dog sitting. Hung up before I could respond. Friday, Daniel needed furniture moving. Assumed I'd be available. I flipped pages. But here's the interesting part. Wednesday evening. Overheard discussion of my limitations. Topic, how I've never faced real challenges. Consensus, my advice, is simple. My experience irrelevant. My work was easy. Sophie was staring at the adults with wide eyes. You said Grandma's work was easy? Sophie, Rachel said quickly. Adults sometimes speak without thinking. Teaching isn't easy, Sophie said fiercely. Mrs. Rodriguez says teaching is one of the hardest jobs because you have to know everything and be patient all the time and help kids who don't want to learn. You're right, sweetheart, I said, my voice gentler now. Teaching is hard. So is raising children, managing a household and supporting a family. All work has dignity. I closed the notebook and set it aside. I'm going to make this simple, since you seem to think I'm good at simple things. Sunday dinners are now potluck. Everyone brings something, everyone helps clean up. Mom? Rachel started. I'm not finished. Tom, I'm removing myself as co-signer on your lease. You have 30 days to find alternative arrangements. Tom's face went white. You can't be serious. I'm also discontinuing emergency financial support for everyone. Daniel, Evelyn, Tom, Rachel. You're all adults with careers. Figure it out. Margaret, this is extreme, William began. Is it? I looked at my husband. When did you last do dishes after Sunday dinner? Well, you're better at... I'm not better at anything. I'm just willing to do it. There's a difference. The silence that followed was thick with shock and growing anger. So what? Tom said finally. You're just going to abandon us? Punish us for some careless comments? I'm going to stop enabling you to take me for granted. I began stacking plates again, my movements calm and deliberate. Love shouldn't require me to disappear. Rachel stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. We're leaving. That's your choice. Come on, David, Sophie, get your things. But I didn't finish my dessert, Sophie protested. You can have dessert at home. As they gathered their belongings, Sophie approached me cue, dried the last plate. For the first time in 40 years I had spoken my truth to my family. The aftermath was yet to be determined, but the words were finally out. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my quiet kitchen, notebook open beside me. On a fresh page I wrote, Day 1 of change. Below that, I told them the truth. Now we'll see what they do with it. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood as I sat with my coffee and stared at the silent phone. Usually Monday brought a flurry of calls. Rachel needing help with Sophie's schedule. Tom wanting advice about client meetings. Evelyn asking about family plans. Today, nothing. I opened my notebook to the page I'd started last night. Cost. Assessment. Time to calculate exactly what my family rebellion was going to cost. Financially, emotionally, practically. Helen knocked at 8:30, carrying a box of pastries from downtown. "Thought you might need comfort food," she said, studying my face. "How did yesterday go?" I told them the truth. All of it? Enough of it. I poured her coffee and described the dinner conversation, watching her eyebrows rise higher with each detail. "You told Tom you're removing yourself as co-signer." "I did. And Rachel about the Sunday dinner changes." "That too." Helen was quiet for a long moment, then broke into a slow smile. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," I admitted, "but also lighter somehow. That's the feeling of not carrying everyone else's weight." We sat in comfortable silence, eating Danish and drinking coffee, while I processed the magnitude of what I'd done. "Helen, what if I've made a terrible mistake? What if they just walk away? Then you'll know where you really stand." "That's not comforting." "It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be honest." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Margaret, what's the worst thing that could happen?" I'd been avoiding that question all night. They could decide. I'm not worth the trouble. Stop calling. Stop visiting. I could lose my family. And what's the best thing that could happen? They could respect me. Actually see me as a person instead of a service provider. Which outcome seems more likely, based on how they've behaved for 40 years? I knew the answer, but didn't want to say it aloud. The phone rang at 9:15. Tom's name appeared on the caller ID. "Good luck," Helen whispered. I answered on the fourth ring. "Hello, Tom." "Mom, we need to talk. About yesterday." "I'm listening." "This co-signer thing. You can't be serious. The lease renewal is due next week. If I can't get it signed, I'll lose the apartment. What are your alternatives?" "What alternatives? Mom, my credit is still rebuilding from the business startup costs. No one else is going to co-sign without seeing income statements I don't have yet." I waited, saying nothing. "Mom, are you there?" "I'm here." "So you'll reconsider?" "No." The silence stretched out. "I can't believe you're doing this over some dinner conversation." "Tom, what was your credit score when I first co-signed for you?" "I don't remember exactly. 460. Your debt-to-income ratio was 80%. You defaulted on 2 credit cards and a car loan." "That was 3 years ago." "It was 8 months ago. The apartment lease." Silence. "In the past year, I've co-signed for your apartment, your business loan, and your car lease. Do you know what my liability exposure is?" "Your what?" "If you default on everything I've guaranteed, I'm responsible for $68,000 in debt." "I'm not going to default." "Tom, you've missed payments on every single obligation. I've covered them so your credit wouldn't be damaged. Further, you offered to help." "I offered to help you get back on your feet, not to become permanently responsible for your financial choices." His voice was getting louder. "So what am I supposed to do? Move back in with you and Dad?" "You're 35 years old. Figure it out." "This is insane, Mom. All this over some comments that weren't even meant to hurt you." "Tom." I kept my voice level. "What's my educational background?" "You went to college. What degree?" "I don't know." "Education?" "Bachelor's in English literature." Master's in elementary education, additional certification in special education, 30 hours toward a doctorate in educational psychology. Silence. What was my starting salary as a teacher? Mom, why does this matter? What was my salary when I retired? I have no idea. $68,000. Plus benefits. I managed classroom budgets ranging from $5,000 to $15,000 per year. I wrote grants totaling over $200,000 during my career. I supervised student teachers, mentored new faculty, and served on curriculum committees. Okay, but now tell me again how I don't understand the real world. The line was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Mom, I'm sorry if we hurt your feelings. Tom, stop. This isn't about hurt feelings. This is about respect. I looked at Helen, who nodded encouragingly. You're going to figure out your housing situation without my financial backing. You're going to thank people when they help you, and you're going to stop treating my intelligence like a charming quirk. And if I don't, then you'll discover what it's like to navigate the real world without a safety net. I hung up before he could respond. Helen was grinning. That was magnificent. That was terrifying. Same thing, sometimes. The phone rang again 20 minutes later. Rachel. Mom, Tom called me. He's very upset about this co-signer situation. I imagine he is. Don't you think you're being a little extreme? I mean, he depends on that apartment for client meetings. Rachel, let me ask you something. How much have I spent on childcare for Sophie in the past year? What does that have to do with anything? Answer the question. A pause. I don't know. Some. I opened my notebook to the detailed financial records I'd been keeping. $4,600. After school care when you worked late. Weekend sitting for client dinners. Emergency coverage when she was sick and couldn't go to school. You offered... What do you pay other babysitters? $15 an hour, usually. I charge nothing. $4,600 at $15 an hour represents over 300 hours of childcare. Mom, where is this going? Yesterday, you describe me as someone who's never faced real challenges. But you trust me enough to care for your most precious responsibility, 300 hours a year. Rachel was quiet. Either I'm competent enough to trust with your daughter, or I'm too simple to understand complex situations. Pick one. That's not. It's not the same thing. Isn't it? Rachel, what happens if I stop providing free childcare? You wouldn't do that, wouldn't I? Mom, you love Sophie. I adore Sophie, which is why I want her to grow up understanding that love includes respect. What lesson does she learn when she watches you dismiss the person who cares for her? The silence stretched. Are you saying you won't watch Sophie anymore? I'm saying the terms are changing. If you need childcare, you ask politely, and you pay fairly. If I'm not available, you make other arrangements without guilt trips or emotional manipulation. This is about money. This is about respect. Money is just how we measure it. I can't believe you're doing this. I can't believe it took me this long. After Rachel hung up, I sat with Helen in the quiet kitchen, processing what I'd just done. Any regrets? Helen asked. Ask me in 6 months. What's next? I flipped to a fresh page in my notebook. I need to figure out what I actually want my life to look like. Meaning. For 40 years, my identity has been defined by what I do for other people. If I stop doing all of that, who am I? Helen smiled. That's the most important question you've ever asked. I wrote it at the top of the page. Who am I when I'm not taking care of everyone else? Below that, I started a list. Things I've always wanted to do. Travel, write, read books that weren't school-related, take art classes, learn photography, visit museums without rushing through them to get home for dinner preparation, volunteer for causes I cared about instead of causes my family needed help with, make friends based on shared interests instead of family obligations, date my husband, again instead of just coordinating logistics with him. The list grew longer as I remembered dreams I'd set aside, interests I'd abandoned, parts of myself I'd forgotten existed. "This is exciting," Helen said, reading over my shoulder. "This is terrifying." Same thing. By afternoon, the phone had stopped ringing. My family was either regrouping, sulking, or genuinely shocked into silence. I used the quiet time to research. What did it cost to hire reliable childcare in our area? What were current co-signing requirements for rental agreements? What was the going rate for house cleaning services? I wasn't being vindictive. I was being realistic. If my family wanted to continue relying on me for services, they needed to understand the value of what they were asking for. More importantly, I needed to understand it myself. At 5 o'clock, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I made dinner for one, a simple salad, a piece of grilled chicken, a glass of wine. I ate slowly, tasting every bite instead of wolfing down food while planning the next meal. William came home at 6 to find the kitchen clean and no dinner waiting. "Where's dinner?" he asked, looking genuinely confused. "I made mine already. Yours is up to you." "Margaret, what's going on?" Tom called, very upset about some co-signing issue, and Rachel mentioned something about childcare. I set down my wine glass. "William, sit down. We need to talk." William sat across from me at the kitchen table, looking like a man who'd walked into the wrong house. His confusion was almost amusing. After 40 years of marriage, he genuinely seemed surprised that his dinner wasn't waiting. "I don't understand what's happening," he said finally. "What's happening is that I'm no longer willing to be invisible in my own life. Invisible." "Margaret, that's ridiculous. You're the center of this family." "I'm the service provider of this family. There's a difference." I opened my notebook to the page I'd titled William's Contributions and slid it across the table. His face went pale as he read. This is a list of household tasks. It's a list of everything I do that you don't notice. Meal planning, grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, laundry, bill paying, appointment scheduling, gift buying, social calendar management, family communication coordination. He looked up from the page. "We've always divided responsibilities." "How? What are your responsibilities?" "Well, the lawn care, home maintenance, financial planning. William, I pay all the bills. I balance the checkbook. I manage our savings accounts. I research and purchase insurance. What financial planning are you referring to?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Investment decisions." "Name the last investment decision you made." Silence. "The lawn service costs $80 a month. Home maintenance consists of calling contractors that I research and schedule." "When did you last fix something yourself?" "Margaret, what's the point of this?" "The point is that you, like our children, have become accustomed to treating my contributions as invisible while overestimating your own." I retrieved the notebook and flipped to a fresh section. "This week, you need to take over meal planning and grocery shopping." "I don't know how—" "You'll learn. Sunday dinner is now potluck, so you need to coordinate with the family about who's bringing what." "Margaret, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. I'm asking you to participate in your own household." William stared at me like I'd suggested he learn to fly. I work all day. So did I. For 32 years I worked all day, and then came home to work all evening. That was different. How? Well, you were better at domestic things. I was willing to do domestic things. Again, there's a difference. The phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Daniel's name appeared on the caller ID. "Margaret, I've been thinking about yesterday, and I owe you an apology," he said when I answered. "I'm listening." "We shouldn't have talked about you that way. It was disrespectful." I waited for more. When nothing came, I said, And I'm sorry." "Daniel, what specifically are you apologizing for?" For saying your advice was simple. What else?" A long pause. "I'm not sure what you want me to say." "I want you to understand what you're apologizing for. You dismissed my intelligence, minimized my experience, and characterized my career as easy. Which part troubles you most?" "All of it troubles me, Margaret. We were wrong." "Why were you wrong?" Because you're smart and experienced, and we shouldn't have said those things." It was a start, but it felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced the words without thinking about their meaning. "Daniel, what do you need from me this week?" You mean?" "Usually by Monday you've called about something. Help with paperwork, advice about Evelyn's birthday, questions about family plans. What do you need?" "Nothing right now." "When you do need something, how will you ask?" "I'll ask politely." "You'll ask politely, explain why you need help, and accept no as an answer if I'm not available." "Okay. Margaret, are we okay?" "We're figuring that out." After Daniel hung up, William was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're really serious about this," he said. "Dead serious. What if they just stop calling? Stop coming around?" It was the question I'd been avoiding all day. Then I'll know where I really stood. "And us? What about our marriage?" "What about it? This affects me too. If you stop doing all the things you've always done, you'll have to start doing some of them yourself. Margaret, I am 65 years old. I don't know how to plan meals or coordinate family schedules or... I'm 63 and I learned. You can learn too." That evening, Sophie called. "Grandma, Mom says you're upset about something." "I'm not upset, sweetheart. I'm making some changes." "What kind of changes?" "The kind that help people treat each other better." "Are you mad at me?" "Not at all. Why would I be mad at you?" "Mom said something about babysitting being different now." I chose my words carefully. "Sophie, do you think it's fair when people don't say thank you for help?" "No, that's rude." "Do you think it's okay to ask someone to do something without saying please?" "No. We learned that in kindergarten." "Well, some of the adults in our family forgot those kindergarten lessons, so I'm helping them remember." "Oh." A pause. "Grandma, did I forget to say thank you for something?" "You always say thank you, sweetheart. You're very polite." "Good. I don't want you to be sad." "I'm not sad. I'm actually hopeful." "What does that mean?" "It means I think things are going to get better." After Sophie hung up, I realized she was the only family member who'd asked about my feelings rather than their own inconvenience. Tuesday brought the first real test. Rachel called at 7:30 in the morning. "Mom, I have an emergency. My regular sitter canceled, and I have a deposition in an hour. Can you take Sophie to school and pick her up at 3? What's your backup plan if I can't?" I don't have one. That's why I'm calling you. Rachel, yesterday I explained the new terms. Did you forget, or are you testing to see if I meant it? Mom, this is an emergency. No, this is poor planning. Emergencies are unexpected. Childcare falling through is a predictable risk that requires contingency planning. So, you won't help? I'm available today for $20 an hour, with a 4-hour minimum. Do you want to hire me? The silence was so long, I thought she'd hung up. You want me to pay you to watch my own daughter? Rachel, if your regular sitter hadn't cancelled, what would you have paid her? That's different. How? Because you're family. Exactly. Family members deserve respect, gratitude, and fair compensation. Strangers get paid. Family gets exploited. I'm changing that dynamic. This is insane. This is business. Do you want to hire me or not? She hung up without answering. 20 minutes later, she called back. Fine. $20 an hour. But this is ridiculous. I'll be there. In 30 minutes. Have the cash ready. When I arrived at Rachel's house, Sophie was waiting with her backpack, looking confused. Grandma, Mom says she's paying you to take me to school? That's right. But you always take me places. And now your mom is showing appreciation by paying me fairly for my time. Like a job? Like respect? Rachel appeared, looking harried and holding 4 $20 bills. Here, she said, thrusting the money at me. Sophie, get in the car. Grandma will take you to school. Thank you, I said pointedly. What? When someone provides a service, you say thank you. Rachel's jaw tightened. Thank you. You're welcome. The drive to Sophie's school was quiet until she asked, Grandma, are you and Mom fighting? We're learning to communicate better. It feels like fighting. Sometimes growth feels uncomfortable, sweetheart, but it's necessary. Will you still be my grandma after all this growing? I pulled over and turned to look at her properly. Sophie, I will always be your grandmother. Nothing will ever change that. What's changing is that I'm teaching everyone to treat each other with kindness and respect. Even Mom, especially Mom. That afternoon, I picked Sophie up from school and brought her to my house for the remaining hours. We worked on homework, together, and I made her a snack. This is fun, she said, like a play date with Grandma. When Rachel arrived at 6 to collect her, she looked around my kitchen suspiciously. Everything go okay? Perfectly. Sophie finished her homework, had a healthy snack, and we read together. Good. Rachel hesitated. The money thing. What about it? It's going to add up quickly if this becomes regular. Then you'll need to develop reliable backup childcare arrangements. Or you could just go back to the way things were. No. Rachel studied my face. You really mean this, don't you? I really do. Mom, I can't afford to pay a sitter every time my regular arrangements fall through. Then make better arrangements. It's not that simple. Rachel, you're a lawyer. You solve complex problems for a living. Surely you can figure out reliable childcare. She left without saying goodbye, Sophie waving from the car window as they drove away. That evening, William attempted to make dinner. I found him standing in the kitchen staring into the refrigerator with the helpless expression of someone facing advanced calculus. There's nothing here, he said. There's plenty here. You just don't know how to turn ingredients into meals. Can't you just... No. He ordered pizza. While we ate, he asked, How long is this going to go on? Which part? All of it. The notebook keeping, the money demands, the service refusals. Until respect becomes automatic instead of optional. And how long will that take? However long it takes." William was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "I never realized how much you did. Because I never made you realize it." "Are you angry with me?" I considered the question. "I'm disappointed, but anger would require me to believe you were deliberately ignoring my contributions. I think you genuinely didn't see them. And now? Now you're learning to see. It's going to be hard. Most worthwhile things are." That night, I updated my notebook with the day's events. Rachel had paid me for childcare. Reluctantly, but she'd paid. William had acknowledged not seeing my contributions. Daniel had apologized, however imperfectly. Small steps, but movement nonetheless. Under Day 2 observations, I wrote, "Change is uncomfortable for everyone, including me. But discomfort means growth is happening." Wednesday morning brought an unexpected visitor. David, Rachel's husband, stood on my front porch at 8 o'clock with 2 cups of coffee and an uncomfortable expression. "Margaret, do you have a few minutes?" I let him in, curious. In 15 years of marriage to my daughter, David had rarely initiated private conversations with me. "Rachel doesn't know I'm here," he said, settling at my kitchen table. I gathered that. "She's struggling with the changes you've made." I waited for him to continue. "Yesterday, when her sitter canceled, she had a complete meltdown. Not just about the inconvenience, about the money. She couldn't understand why you'd charge family for help. And you." David was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I was surprised it took you this long. That wasn't what I'd expected to hear." "David, what do you mean?" "Margaret, I've watched you for 15 years. The way you handle everything, solve everyone's problems, never ask for anything in return. I've wondered when you'd reach your limit. You never said anything. It wasn't my place, but I've seen the patterns." He pulled out his phone and showed me a text exchange. "This is from last month. Rachel texting me about your anniversary dinner." I read the messages. "Rachel, Mom wants to go to Romano's for their anniversary. Can you believe that? So expensive." David, "It's their anniversary. Why not take them somewhere nice?" Rachel, "We're not paying. She just wants Dad to think we chose it. She always handles the restaurant selection and tells him we picked it." David, "That seems complicated." Rachel, "That's just how Mom is. She likes to orchestrate things and then act like someone else had the idea." I stared at the phone screen, processing what I'd read. "She thinks I'm manipulative," I said quietly. "She thinks you're conflict avoidant. There's a difference." "Is there?" David considered this. "Margaret, why do you handle gift-giving for everyone? Because I'm good at it? Or because you can't trust anyone else to do it properly?" The question hit harder than I'd expected. Maybe both. "Here's what I've observed," David said, carefully. "You anticipate problems and solve them before anyone else notices they exist, but then you feel invisible because no one sees the work you put in. You think this is my fault? I think it's complicated. You've trained everyone to depend on you, and now you're upset that they do." I opened my notebook and showed him my lists, the documented requests, the financial calculations, the catalog of dismissive comments. David read quietly, his expression growing more serious with each page. "Jesus, Margaret. I didn't realize it was this extensive. Most people don't. That's the point." "The co-signing alone." He whistled softly. "Tom has no idea what kind of liability you've taken on." Tom has no idea about a lot of things. David closed the notebook and looked at me directly. What do you want from this situation? I want to be seen, respected, valued for more than just my usefulness. And you think charging for services will accomplish that? I think establishing boundaries will accomplish that. The money is just a way to measure respect. What if it backfires? What if they just find other solutions? Then I'll know where I really stood. David was quiet for a long time. Margaret, can I tell you something Rachel doesn't know? I nodded. We're in financial trouble. Not catastrophic, but serious. Rachel's been working late because she's desperate to make partner, and the partnership track requires maintaining a certain billable hour minimum. How serious? Sophie's private school, the mortgage on the house, Rachel's student loans, credit card debt from trying to maintain appearances. We're leveraged beyond our comfort zone. And my free childcare has been subsidizing that lifestyle significantly. I thought about the $4,600 I'd calculated. Money that had allowed Rachel to work late, pursue high-profile cases, build her partnership prospects. David, why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand the real cost of your decision. If Rachel has to pay for childcare, something else has to give. Probably Sophie's school. That's not my responsibility. I know, but I wanted you to understand the ripple effects. Are you asking me to reconsider? I'm asking you to consider a gradual transition instead of an abrupt cutoff. I appreciated his honesty, but it also confirmed what I'd suspected. My family's financial stability depended on my invisible subsidies. David, what would you do if I weren't available for childcare? Find alternative arrangements, probably a nanny share with another family, or after-school programs. How much would that cost? $800 to $1,200 a month, depending on the arrangement. So you've been receiving over $1,000 worth of services from me, monthly, for free. Yes. And Rachel's reaction to paying me $80 for emergency coverage yesterday. She was furious, because she's been getting something for free that costs everyone else $1,000. David nodded, reluctantly. David, I'm not trying to punish anyone, but I can't continue subsidizing everyone's lifestyle while being treated as if my contributions don't matter. I understand. Do you think Rachel understands? Not yet, but she will. After David left, I spent the morning researching local childcare options, elder care services, housekeeping rates, and meal delivery costs. The numbers were staggering. If my family had to purchase the services I provided for free, they'd spend thousands of dollars monthly. The phone rang at noon. Tom. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation Monday. And? I found another co-signer for the lease. I was surprised by the stab of hurt I felt. That was quick. Yeah, well, Matthew's brother has good credit, and he owed Matthew a favor. I see. So we're good. You don't have to worry about the apartment thing anymore. Tom, what did you learn from this experience? That I need backup plans? What else? I don't know. What else was I supposed to learn? How about gratitude or acknowledgement of the risk I took co-signing for you? Mom, you said you didn't want to co-sign anymore, so I found another solution. Problem solved. Tom, do you understand that co-signing means I was legally responsible for your debts? I guess. If you'd defaulted on everything, I would have owed $68,000. But I didn't default. You missed payments, multiple times. I covered them. You didn't tell me that. I shouldn't have had to tell you. You should have been tracking your own payment schedule. Silence. Tom, do you remember when you missed your first payment on the business loan? Vaguely. It was 3 months after you opened. You called me, panicked, said the bank was threatening to call the loan. You begged me to cover it just once. Okay, yeah, but I paid you back. Tom, I have the records. You've missed 17 payments in 2 years. I've covered them all. The silence stretched longer this time. I didn't realize it was that many. That's $4,200, Tom. Not including the late fees I paid to protect both our credit scores. Jesus, Mom! Why didn't you say something? Because every time I covered a payment, you promised it wouldn't happen again. I believed you wanted to do better. I do want to do better. Then why did it take finding another co-signer for you to care about the apartment lease? Why wasn't protecting my financial standing motivation enough? Another long pause. I don't know. Tom, I love you, but love without respect isn't sustainable. What does that mean? It means I'm not going to keep enabling behavior that hurts both of us. So what? You're cutting me off completely? I'm setting boundaries. If you need help, ask directly. Be honest about your situation. Show gratitude when help is given. Take responsibility when things go wrong. That seems reasonable. It should seem reasonable. The fact that it feels like new information tells me how far we've drifted from basic courtesy. After I hung up, I made myself lunch and sat in my garden with Helen, who'd stopped by with fresh tomatoes from her yard. How are you holding up? She asked. David came by this morning. Rachel's David. I told her about our conversation, including the financial revelations. So Rachel's been struggling financially while criticizing your spending. Helen said. It appears so. And Tom found a replacement co-signer within 3 days of you saying no. Yes. How does that make you feel? Replaced. Helen was quiet, letting me process. But also relieved, I continued. If he could find someone else that quickly, then my help wasn't as essential as I'd thought. It was just convenient. There's a difference between being needed and being used. I'm starting to understand that. My phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. Margaret, Daniel's been asking about Thanksgiving plans. Are you hosting again this year? I stared at the message. For 23 years, I'd hosted Thanksgiving for the extended family. 16 people, 2 days of preparation, hundreds of dollars in food costs, and hours of cleanup. The assumption that I'd continue was breathtaking. I texted back, not this year. Feel free to organize something if you'd like. The response came, immediately. What? Why not? It's tradition. Traditions require mutual participation and appreciation. I'm taking a break. Margaret, this is ridiculous. You can't just cancel Thanksgiving. I'm not canceling anything. I'm declining to host. You're welcome to take over. I don't know how to cook for that many people. Neither did I the first time. You'll figure it out. Helen had been reading over my shoulder. How does it feel to type those words? Terrifying and liberating. Good. You're learning to distinguish between your responsibilities and other people's expectations. That evening, Sophie called me. Grandma, Mom said you're acting weird. How so? She said you're charging family for help now. I'm establishing fair exchanges, yes. Can I ask why? I considered how to explain this to a 15-year-old without maligning her mother. Sophie, have you ever had a friend who only called when they needed something? Yeah. Becca in 8th grade. She'd only text when she needed homework answers. How did that make you feel? Used. like she didn't actually care about me as a person. That's how I've been feeling with the family. But we're family. That's different. Is it? Should family members treat each other worse than friends? Sophie was quiet for a moment. I never thought about it that way. I love everyone. Deeply. But love doesn't mean accepting disrespect or being taken for granted. Mom's really stressed about the childcare thing. I understand. Change is difficult. She said she might have to take me out of Whitman Academy. I felt the familiar tug of guilt, the impulse to solve everyone's problems. But I also remembered David's words about enabling patterns. Sophie, would that upset you? Kind of. I like my school, but Mom and Dad fight about money a lot lately. Maybe if they had less pressure, they'd fight less. The wisdom of a 15-year-old, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. Sophie, can I tell you something important? Sure. Adults are responsible for their own financial decisions. If your parents are stressed about money, that's something they need to address together. It's not your job to fix it, and it's not mine either. But your mom's mom. Don't parents help their kids? There's a difference between helping and enabling. Help empowers people to solve their own problems. Enabling prevents them from learning to solve problems themselves. So charging for babysitting is help? It's establishing that my time and energy have value. When people pay for something, they tend to appreciate it more. That makes sense, I guess. Sophie, regardless of what happens with your parents' financial situation, you know I love you, right? Of course, Grandma. And you can always call me just to talk, not because you need something. I know. I like talking to you. I like talking to you, too. You're one of the few people who listens to my stories without looking at your phone. Sophie laughed. Your stories are interesting. Mom thinks they're boring, but I think she's wrong. After we said goodbye, I sat in my living room, surrounded by photo albums and memory boxes. For decades, I'd measured my worth by my usefulness. To others, the more I gave, the more valuable I felt. But utility isn't love, convenience isn't respect, and being indispensable often means being invisible. I opened my notebook and wrote, Day 5 of Boundaries, David's visit, acknowledgement of patterns, financial reality check, Tom's solution, quick replacement suggests convenience over necessity, Evelyn's assumption, 23 years of hosting creates no gratitude, Sophie's wisdom. Stress might decrease if expectations were realistic. Key insight. Being needed and being valued are different things. I've been needed but not valued. The goal is both, or neither. Tomorrow I decided I would call a family meeting, not to argue or defend my choices, but to clearly communicate my new boundaries and expectations. It was time for everyone to understand that Margaret Hall was no longer a service provider. She was a person who deserved respect. The following Saturday, I sent a group text to the family. Family meeting Sunday at 2 p.m. Important matters to discuss. Please confirm attendance. The responses came quickly. Rachel, what's this about? Tom, can we do it over the phone? Daniel, is everything okay? Evelyn, this seems dramatic. I replied simply, see you at 2. Helen arrived early to help me set up. We arranged chairs in a circle in my living room, placed water glasses on side tables, and I prepared a folder with my documentation. Are you nervous? Helen asked. Terrified, I admitted, but necessary. Remember, you're not asking for their permission to have boundaries. You're informing them of your decisions. William was the first family member to arrive, looking confused. Margaret, what's all this about? We'll discuss it when everyone's here. Rachel came next with David and Sophie. Tom arrived with Matthew, which surprised me. I hadn't invited Matthew, but I decided not to make an issue of it. Daniel and Evelyn were last, both wearing expressions of barely concealed annoyance. Once everyone was seated, I stood at the front of the room. Thank you all for coming. I've called this meeting because our family dynamics need to change. Mom, is this about the babysitting thing? Rachel interrupted. Because I think you're overreacting. Rachel, please let me finish. I opened my folder and pulled out the first document. For the past month, I've been documenting our interactions and calculating the value of services I provide to this family. I showed them the spreadsheet I'd created, with columns for services rendered, time invested and monetary value. In the past year alone, I've provided over $47,000 worth of unpaid services to various family members. The room was silent. This includes childcare, housekeeping, meal preparation, financial support, co-signing loans, gift purchasing and wrapping, event planning, and emotional labor. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Mom, we didn't ask you to calculate. No, you didn't ask. You assumed. And therein lies the problem. I moved to the next document. I've also documented instances of dismissive behavior, disrespectful comments, and moments when my contributions were minimized or ignored. I read a few examples aloud, including the conversation I'd overheard between Rachel and Tom about my intelligence. Rachel's face flushed. We didn't mean for you to hear that. But you meant to say it, and that's what matters. Evelyn spoke up. Margaret, this seems petty. Families help each other. That's what families do. You're right, Evelyn. Families do help each other. The key word is each other. This has been decidedly one-sided. I turned to Daniel. When was the last time you offered to help me with anything, without being asked? Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Tom, when was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? Not because you needed something? Tom looked at his hands. Rachel, when was the last time you expressed genuine appreciation for the childcare I provide, rather than treating it as a given? Rachel's voice was small. I do appreciate it. Your actions suggest otherwise. When I asked for payment for emergency childcare last week, your response was anger, not gratitude. I sat down, facing them all. I love each of you deeply, but love without respect isn't sustainable. And I haven't been respected in this family for a very long time. William finally spoke. Margaret, what do you want from us? I want acknowledgement of my contributions. I want gratitude instead of assumptions. I want to be consulted, not commanded. And I want reciprocity. What does that look like practically? David asked. It means when I provide services, they're appreciated and compensated fairly. It means when I decline to help, that decision is respected. It means my time and energy are valued. Sophie raised her hand tentatively. Grandma? Yes, sweetheart. I think what you're saying makes sense. Sometimes I see how people talk to you, and it doesn't seem fair. Rachel looked stricken. Sophie, Mom, it's true. Remember last month when Grandma spent all day making Dad's birthday cake from scratch, and you complained that the frosting was too sweet? The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Matthew, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Maybe I should go. Actually, Matthew, I said, I'm glad you're here. You've witnessed many of these interactions. Do you think my concerns are unreasonable? Matthew looked around the room nervously. I've noticed that people rely on you a lot. And do you see appreciation expressed for that reliance? Not really. Tom stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. We're your family. We shouldn't have to pay you for help. Tom, you pay strangers for services I provide for free. You pay your barber, your mechanic, your accountant. Why is my labor worthless? Because you're our mom. Being your mother doesn't make me your employee. Rachel was crying now. We didn't realize we were hurting you. The lack of realization is part of the problem, Rachel. You've been so focused on your own needs that you've stopped seeing me as a person with needs of my own. Helen, who had been quietly observing, spoke for the first time. I've watched Margaret sacrifice for all of you for years. I've seen her cover your mistakes, solve your problems, and support your dreams. And I've seen the toll it's taken on her self-worth. Who asked you? Evelyn snapped. Margaret did. She asked me to be here as witness and support. I stood again. Here's what's going to change. I will no longer provide services without clear communication and fair compensation. I will no longer cover financial obligations that aren't mine. I will no longer accept disrespectful treatment in the name of family loyalty. So you're cutting us off? Daniel asked. I'm establishing boundaries. If you want help, ask respectfully. If I decline, accept that gracefully. If I agree to help, express genuine gratitude. And Thanksgiving, Evelyn demanded. If someone wants to organize Thanksgiving, I'll be happy to attend as a guest, but I won't be hosting unless specifically asked and offered meaningful help. The meeting continued for another hour, with tears, arguments, and gradual understanding. By the end, everyone had left with homework, to think about how they could contribute more to family relationships instead of just taking from them. The weeks following the family meeting were difficult. There were hurt feelings, defensive reactions, and attempts to guilt me back into old patterns. Rachel tried several approaches. First, anger. You're tearing this family apart over money. Then manipulation. Sophie misses having you pick her up from school. Finally, negotiation. What if we split the difference on childcare costs? Tom's reaction was to distance himself entirely for 2 weeks. Then call in crisis when his backup childcare plan fell through. I listened sympathetically but held my boundary. If he needed emergency help, he could hire a professional service. Daniel and Evelyn attempted to recruit William as their advocate, but William surprised everyone by supporting my position. Margaret's right, he told them. We've taken her for granted. The real turning point came when Sophie asked to spend an afternoon with me. Not because her parents needed childcare, but because she wanted to learn to bake bread. Grandma, she said as we kneaded dough together. I've been thinking about what you said at the meeting. What about it? About being appreciated. I realized I do that too sometimes. Just assume you'll always be available. Sophie, you're 15. It's normal for teenagers to be somewhat self-centered. The difference is, you're capable of recognizing it and changing. I want to do better. How? Well, I could call you sometimes just to talk. Not because I need something. And I could help with family stuff instead of just showing up and expecting to be served. I hugged her flowery hands and all. That would mean the world to me. Sophie became my unexpected ally in family transformation. She started calling weekly just to chat, offered to help with dishes at family gatherings, and even defended my boundaries to her parents when they wavered. Rachel's real change began when she had to arrange alternative childcare for a full week while David traveled for work. The experience of coordinating schedules, paying professional rates, and managing the logistics alone gave her new appreciation for what I'd been providing. She called me on Friday evening, exhausted. "Mom, I owe you an apology." "For what, specifically?" "For everything. For taking you for granted. For dismissing your contributions. For treating you like hired help instead of my mother." "Thank you for saying that. I had no idea how much work goes into what you do, or how much it costs to replace. And now you do." "Mom, could we start over, with proper arrangements and fair compensation and actual appreciation? I'd like that." Tom's transformation took longer and came in fits and starts. His first genuine apology came when his business loan went into default, despite having a new co-signer. Apparently, Matthew's brother was less reliable than I'd. "Ben!" "Mom, I messed up. Again." "What happened?" "The new co-signer never made his payment. The bank called the loan. I'm probably going to lose the business." My first instinct was to offer help, but I waited for him to actually ask. "I know I have no right to ask this, but could you help me understand my options? Not money," he added quickly. "Just advice." We spent an afternoon going through his finances, business plan, and debt obligations. I helped him see that losing the business might actually be a relief. He'd been pouring money into a failing venture for 2 years. "What would you do if you weren't trying to save the business?" I asked. "Get a regular job. Maybe go back to school." "What's stopping you?" "Pride, I guess. Admitting failure." Tom, recognizing when something isn't working isn't failure. It's wisdom. 6 months later, Tom was enrolled in a community college business program and working part-time as a manager at a local restaurant. He seemed happier than he'd been in years. Daniel and Evelyn's changes were more subtle but meaningful. They started contributing to family gatherings instead of just attending. Evelyn learned to cook a few dishes she could bring to potlucks. Daniel began offering practical help, fixing things around my house, researching solutions to problems instead of just dumping them on me. The most surprising change was in William. My quiet husband began speaking up more, both in support of my boundaries and in appreciation of my contributions. "I should have defended you years ago," he told me one evening. "I saw how they treated you, and I said nothing because it was easier to let you handle everything. You're speaking up now. That's what matters. Margaret, you've carried this family on your shoulders for decades. I want to help carry the load." He started small, taking over the bill paying, grocery shopping, and car maintenance scheduling. But the symbolic value was enormous. After 35 years of marriage, William was finally acting like a true partner. 1 year after the family meeting, I hosted Thanksgiving again. But this time, it was different. Rachel arrived early with Sophie, both armed with assigned dishes and detailed preparation schedules. Tom brought his girlfriend Sarah, whom he'd met in his business program, and they handled all the cleanup. Daniel and Evelyn contributed a full menu of side dishes and helped with serving. Most importantly, everyone asked before assuming. "Mom, would you like help with the turkey? Margaret, where would you like us to set up the dessert table? Grandma, should I start the coffee now?" Helen joined us as an honored guest, bringing her famous apple pie and warm appreciation for the family transformation she'd witnessed. During dinner, Rachel raised her glass. "I want to propose a toast to Mom, to Margaret, who taught us that love without respect isn't enough, and that family means supporting each other, not just being supported." "To Margaret," they chorused, and this time I felt truly seen. After dinner, As we sat around the fireplace, Sophie asked me to tell one of my stories, a request that used to be met with eye rolls but now drew genuine attention. I told them about my first teaching job, how terrified I'd been facing a classroom of 32 eighth graders, and how I'd learned that respect must be earned, not demanded. "Just like with families," Sophie observed, and everyone laughed. Later, as I cleaned up, with help from multiple volunteers, I reflected on the journey. The past year had been difficult, painful at times, but necessary. I'd learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was essential. I'd discovered that respect couldn't be given freely to those who didn't value it, and that love required mutual consideration to flourish. Most importantly, I'd reclaimed my sense of self-worth. I was no longer invisible, no longer taken for granted. I was Margaret Hall, mother, grandmother, teacher, friend, and I mattered. Helen stayed after everyone left, helping me put away the good china. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Grateful. Not just for today, but for the courage to speak up last year. Any regrets?" "About setting boundaries? None. About waiting so long to set them? Many." "What would you tell other women in similar situations?" I thought about this carefully. "That your worth isn't measured by your usefulness. That love, without respect, is manipulation, and that it's never too late to teach people how to treat you. Even family, especially family. They're the ones who matter most, so they should treat you best of all." As Helen gathered her coat, she paused. "Margaret, you know what I've learned from watching your transformation?" "What's that?" "That the people who love you will rise to meet your standards, and the people who don't, well, you're better off knowing where you stand." After she left, I sat in my living room, surrounded by photos from the day. In every picture, I looked truly happy. Not the forced smile of someone trying to keep everyone else happy, but the genuine joy of someone who felt valued and respected. On my coffee table lay a handwritten note from Sophie. "Dear Grandma, thank you for teaching us that respect is something we earn by giving it to others. Thank you for showing us that boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges to better relationships. Thank you for being strong enough to demand what you deserved, even when it was hard. Love, Sophie P.S." "Can I come over next weekend to learn how to make your apple cake? Not because Mom needs a babysitter, but because I want to spend time with you." I folded the note carefully and placed it in my memory box, next to letters from students who'd thanked me for believing in them, photos from family celebrations where I'd orchestrated joy behind the scenes, and now, evidence of the most important lesson I'd ever taught. Sometimes the deepest wounds don't come from strangers, but from those you've loved and sacrificed for all your life. But sometimes those same people can learn to love you better, if you're brave enough to show them how. My name is Margaret Hall, and for over 50 years, I was the backbone of this family. Now, I'm its heart, respected, valued, and finally, truly seen. The game had changed and everyone had learned how to play it with dignity.